There is a very specific kind of pain in loving someone who never chose you, not loudly, not clearly, but slowly. They didn't reject you directly. They didn't walk away fully. They just never stepped forward. You were always almost chosen, almost prioritized, almost important, and that almost kept you stuck. You waited for texts that came late, for clarity that never arrived, for effort that appeared only when you pulled back. You told yourself, they care, they just don't show it. You defended them in your mind. You lowered your expectations quietly, and over time something shifted inside you. You stopped asking questions because the answers hurt. You stopped expressing needs because you didn't want to seem demanding. You started accepting breadcrumbs and calling it connection. This is what loving someone who never chose you does. It doesn't break your heart once. It slowly teaches you to doubt your worth. You begin to feel guilty for wanting commitment, ashamed for wanting reassurance, embarrassed for wanting to be chosen fully. And the most painful part is this. You were loyal to someone who was never loyal to your emotional reality. They had options. You had hope. They stayed comfortable. You stayed confused. And somewhere in that imbalance, you lost touch with a very important truth. Love that keeps you waiting is not love. It is emotional suspension. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because it doesn't come with clarity. It comes with confusion. When someone is almost choosing you, it feels hopeful. They don't say no, they don't fully leave. They stay close enough to keep you emotionally invested. And that's why it hurts more. You tell yourself, if they didn't care, they wouldn't stay. You read meaning into small gestures. A late reply becomes effort. A rare check-in becomes interest. A moment of attention becomes proof. But consistency is the only real proof of intention. Being almost chosen keeps you emotionally suspended. You're not secure, but you're not free. You're not loved fully, but you're not released either. And that in-between space slowly damages you. Real choosing is clear. It doesn't require decoding. It doesn't make you anxious. It doesn't leave you questioning where you stand. If someone wants you, you don't have to compete with their distractions. You don't have to wait for the right time. You don't have to convince them of your value. Ambiguity is not kindness. It is avoidance. When someone says, I'm confused, I'm not ready, or let's see where this goes, while still enjoying your emotional presence, they are choosing comfort without responsibility. And that choice has a cost, but only one of you is paying it. You start rearranging your needs. You lower your expectations. You become patient in ways that hurt you. You tell yourself, at least they didn't say no, but silence can be a no. Delay can be a no. Lack of effort can be a no. Rejection doesn't always look like walking away. Sometimes it looks like keeping you close without committing. That is still rejection. Because choosing someone means showing up emotionally, consistently, and clearly. It means making space for them in your life. It means considering their feelings, not just your own comfort. When someone doesn't do that, they are telling you something important, even if they never say it out loud. And the most painful part is this: being almost chosen makes you question yourself. You wonder if you're expecting too much, if you're moving too fast, if you're being needy. But wanting clarity is not neediness. Wanting effort is not pressure. Wanting to be chosen is not insecurity. It is a healthy desire. The problem was never your need for love. The problem was staying in a place where love was always conditional. Being almost chosen keeps hope alive, and hope can become a trap, because as long as you believe maybe, you postpone your healing, you delay your self-respect, you stay emotionally available to someone who is not available to you. Accepting that being almost chosen is still rejection is not about bitterness. It is about honesty. Honesty frees you. It allows you to stop waiting, to stop explaining, to stop shrinking yourself to fit someone's uncertainty. And when you finally accept this truth, something shifts. You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And you start asking, why did I stay where I wasn't chosen? That question doesn't shame you. It wakes you up. Because the moment you choose yourself, you step out of rejection and into dignity. And that is where real love begins. Attachment has a quiet way of changing how you see reality. It doesn't lie loudly. It softens the truth just enough for you to stay. When you are attached, you don't fall in love with what is, you fall in love with what could be. So absence becomes mysterious instead of painful. Silence becomes depth instead of disinterest. Distance becomes space instead of avoidance. You start filling emotional gaps with imagination. If they disappear, you tell yourself they are overwhelmed. If they don't respond, you assume they are busy. If they don't show up emotionally, you believe they just struggle to express feelings. Attachment trains you to protect the bond, even when the bond is hurting you. This is why absence starts feeling romantic, because if you see it clearly, you might have to leave, and attachment is terrified of loss. So your mind works overtime to soften the blow. You remember their best moments. You replay the warmth. You hold on to rare intimacy like evidence. And slowly, the relationship becomes built on memory and hope, not presence. Ask yourself honestly, are you missing them, or are you missing the version of them you imagined? Because real love does not require imagination to survive. It requires participation. When someone is emotionally absent, your nervous system feels it. But attachment overrides that signal. You feel anxious, restless, hyper-aware. Yet instead of listening, you push through. You tell yourself, this is just how love feels, but love does not feel like constant uncertainty. Love does not feel like waiting. Love does not feel like you are always reaching. Attachment also makes absence feel meaningful. You start believing that if it hurts this much, it must be deep. That longing is proof of connection. But longing is not intimacy. Pain is not passion. A secure connection feels boring to an anxious nervous system because chaos is familiar. If you learned love through inconsistency, your body confuses distance with desire. So when someone pulls away, you lean in harder. Not because they are special, but because your attachment is activated. This is not romance. This is survival. And here is the painful truth. You cannot build closeness with someone who is not present. You can analyze them, understand them, defend them. But you cannot feel emotionally safe with someone who keeps leaving you alone in the relationship. Romanticizing absence keeps you stuck. It keeps you emotionally loyal to someone who is not showing up. It keeps you waiting for effort that should be natural. And over time, this does something damaging. It makes you settle for emotional crumbs. You start appreciating bare minimum gestures. You feel grateful for attention that should be normal. This is not love. This is emotional deprivation. Healing begins when you stop interpreting absence as meaning. Silence is information. Distance is communication. Inconsistency is a pattern. When you see absence clearly without romantic filters, you regain power. You stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop hoping for presence from someone who has shown you who they are. And something important happens then. Your nervous system calms. Because real connection does not live in absence. It lives in consistency, in reliability, in emotional availability. You deserve a love you don't have to imagine. You deserve someone who is present, not someone you keep making excuses for. And the moment you stop romanticizing absence, you make space for real love to find you. This is a painful realization, and it usually comes quietly, not in the middle of a fight, not after a dramatic ending. It comes in a moment of self-awareness. You notice how much you have changed, how careful you've become, how often you doubt your own feelings. You realize that loving them required you to constantly adjust yourself. You adjusted your expectations. You adjusted your tone. You adjusted your needs. And at some point, you stopped asking whether this relationship was nourishing you. You only asked how to keep it alive. That is when loving them began to cost you loving yourself. Self-love doesn't disappear suddenly. It erodes. It erodes every time you ignore discomfort to avoid conflict, every time you stay silent to keep peace, every time you accept emotional absence and call it understanding. You start making yourself smaller without realizing it. You begin to feel guilty for wanting reassurance. You feel ashamed for wanting consistency. You apologize for emotions that are valid. And slowly, your inner voice becomes quieter. You stop trusting your instincts. You question whether you are overreacting. You look for reasons to blame yourself instead of addressing what's missing. This is not because you are weak. It's because attachment makes you prioritize connection over self-protection. When loving someone becomes a job, when you are always explaining, adjusting, waiting, something is off. Healthy love does not require you to betray your emotional truth. Another hard truth: you are not loving too much. You are loving in the wrong place. The right relationship does not punish you for having needs. It does not make you feel burdensome for wanting emotional presence. It does not make you work for basic care. But when someone is emotionally unavailable, your love becomes one-sided, and one-sided love always costs the giver. You start investing more to compensate for what's missing. You give empathy where there is avoidance. You give patience where there is inconsistency. You give loyalty where there is uncertainty. And the more you give, the more attached you become, even as you feel emptier. This is where self-abandonment hides behind devotion. You tell yourself you are being supportive, understanding, strong. But strength is not enduring emotional starvation. Strength is knowing when love is no longer mutual. At some point, you have to ask yourself a very honest question. Am I loving them or am I neglecting myself? Because love should add to your life, not drain it. It should make you feel more like yourself, not less. When you start losing your joy, your voice, your confidence, that is not a relationship problem. That is a self-connection problem created by the relations. Hip. The moment you see this clearly, something shifts. You stop chasing their validation. You stop explaining your worth. You stop negotiating your needs. You begin turning your attention back to yourself. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop disappearing. Loving yourself again might feel unfamiliar at first because you've been oriented around someone else for so long. But slowly you remember who you were before the confusion, before the overthinking, before the self-doubt, and you realize something important. Love that costs you your self-respect is not love. It is attachment mixed with fear. Choosing yourself does not erase the love you felt. It rebalances it. And when you stop loving someone at the expense of yourself, you don't become cold. You become whole again. That is not selfish. That is healing. This truth is difficult because it asks you to stop trying. And for someone who loves deeply, stopping feels like failure. But hear this calmly. You cannot compete with someone's lack of readiness. Readiness is not about chemistry. It is not about timing alone. It is not about how much you give. Readiness is an internal state. A person can like you, enjoy you, even care for you, and still be unable to choose you. Not because you are lacking, but because they are unavailable. When someone is not ready, no amount of effort will change that. You can be kind, patient, understanding, emotionally intelligent, and still not be chosen. Because choice does not come from pressure or persuasion, it comes from capacity. Many people mistake emotional inconsistency for mixed signals, but inconsistency is not confusion. It is clarity without courage. Someone who is not ready often keeps one foot in and one foot out. They want connection without commitment, intimacy without responsibility. And if you stay, you start competing with their comfort zone. You compete with their fear of vulnerability. You compete with their past wounds. You compete with their desire to keep options open. But this is a competition you can never win because the finish line keeps moving. You think, if I just love them better, if I'm patient enough, if I don't pressure them. But readiness does not respond to sacrifice. It responds to self-awareness. Another painful truth: when someone is not ready, they benefit from your presence while avoiding your expectations. You give emotional safety, they give uncertainty, and over time, this dynamic drains you. You begin blaming yourself for their hesitation. You wonder if you are asking for too much. You minimize your needs to appear easier to love. This is how self-worth quietly erodes. But let's be very clear, You are not in competition with another person. You are in competition with their unresolved inner world. And you cannot win that by being better, kinder, or more loving. Someone who is ready does not need convincing. They do not need endless time. They do not need you to disappear for them to miss you. They show up because they want to. When you accept this, something painful but freeing happens. You stop taking their unavailability personally. You stop asking, why wasn't I enough? And you start asking, why did I stay where readiness was missing? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to ground you. Because staying in competition with someone's lack of readiness keeps you stuck in hope instead of reality. Letting go is not about giving up on love. It is about refusing to fight someone's internal resistance. Love is not a prize you earn. It is a space two ready people step into. And if someone cannot meet you there, no matter how much you care, it is not your job to wait at the door. Walking away from unreadiness is not rejection. Oh, F them. It is protection of yourself. You are not meant to prove your worth to someone who is not prepared to receive it. The moment you stop competing with unreadiness, you reclaim your peace, and that peace will guide you towards someone who does not hesitate to choose you. Letting go is often misunderstood as weakness, as giving up, as not loving enough. But in reality, letting go is often the first moment you truly choose yourself. People don't let go suddenly. They let go after trying, after explaining, after waiting, after hoping quietly. By the time you are ready to let go, you are not confused anymore. You are tired of second-guessing, tired of emotional hunger, tired of being strong in silence. Letting go doesn't happen because love disappears. It happens because self-respect wakes up. You realize that staying requires you to keep betraying your emotional truth, that being there means continuing to minimize your needs, that your peace is always the price. And slowly something inside you says, enough. Choosing yourself does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop disappearing. You stop waiting for someone to become ready. You stop hoping they will suddenly choose you. You stop explaining why you deserve clarity. You accept reality, not the potential. This is one of the hardest shifts. Releasing who you hoped they would be and accepting who they consistently showed themselves to be. Letting go also means facing the fear you were avoiding, the fear of loneliness, the fear of emptiness, the fear of starting over. But here is the truth. Most people don't tell you the loneliness after letting go is different from the loneliness inside the relationship. One is clean, the other is draining. When you let go, the silence hurts, but it doesn't confuse you. Your nervous system begins to settle. You stop living in anticipation. You stop bracing for disappointment. And in that quiet, you meet yourself again. You begin to hear your own needs, your own boundaries, your own truth. This is where self-trust begins to return. Letting go teaches you that love should not feel like constant effort, that connection should not require emotional sacrifice, that peace is not something you negotiate for. You learn that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is necessary, because the version of you that stayed too long was not weak, they were hopeful, and the version of you that leaves is not cold, they are awake. Choosing yourself means you stop making excuses for emotional absence. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop waiting for breadcrumbs. You decide that being chosen emotionally is the minimum, not the reward. Letting go also redefines love for you. Love becomes something mutual, stable, safe, not something you chase, not something you earn through patience, not something that costs you your self-worth. And when you choose yourself, something powerful happens. You raise your standards without bitterness. You set boundaries without anger. You walk away without hatred. Because you are no longer trying to win someone over. You are honoring yourself. Letting go is not the end of your love story. It is the end of self-abandonment. It is the moment you stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And start saying, I choose myself. That decision changes everything. It opens the door to relationships where love is not confusing, where effort is shared, where your presence is valued. Letting go is not loss, it is alignment. And choosing yourself is the most loving thing you will ever do. Listen to this carefully. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Loving someone who never chose you was not your failure. Staying too long was just your lesson. The moment you stop chasing clarity, you gain peace. The moment you stop waiting to be chosen, you remember your worth. And one day, love will come differently. It will feel calm, clear, reciprocal. No confusion, no anxiety, no shrinking. Until then, stand with yourself, choose yourself, fully, quietly, without apology, because the deepest healing begins the moment you stop loving someone who never chose you and finally choose yourself.